Presentation of Professor Dr. Muhammad Tajuddin bin Muhammad Razdi, his book on issues and ideas in education for the new Malaysia. And he subsequently did write an article in the Star, 2nd of August issue, titled, "What Ails Our Education System?" So Prof Tajuddin will be talking to us basically based on the article that was published. Yeah. So so let me start by introducing our panels of speakers that we have today. We have, of course, our main speaker, that's Professor Dr. Muhammad Tajuddin Muhammad Razdi. He's a prolific writer and speaker in architecture, politics, social issues, religious matters, and education. He was educated in the US, in the United States of America at the University of Milwaukee, right? I hope I got that right, where he obtained his master's and Bachelor of Science in Architecture. He was awarded the Doctor of Philosophy from the University of Edinburgh, Scotland. Professor Tajuddin has authored and published 52 books to date on architecture concerning Islam, the mosque, housing, community building, and planning of administrative centers. He has won 4 National Book Awards. He was a columnist for several news media such as the Borneo Post, Free Malaysia Today, Sinar Harian, and Utusan Malaysia. He is currently a columnist in the Star and Sinchu Daily. His latest books are Rethinking Malaysia by Gerak Budaya and Not the Islam I Know by Z Publications. Recently, he received a Civil Society Award by the Kuala Lumpur and Selangor Chinese Assembly Hall, mainly for his critical writings in the media. He's also a council member of the Majlis Perundingan Keharmonian Rakyat appointed by the PH government. I can't add anything more, but I'm just in awe and really inspired to really stay tuned in and focus on what Prof Tajuddin has got to say to us in a short while. I will, at this point, also introduce our panelists so we know who's in the room, and then after Prof has presented, we can get on to immediately inviting our panelists to comment or to respond. Yeah. So reverse alphabetical order. Yeah. I'll start with Encik Taufik Tun Dr. Ismail. I think we all know Taman Tun Dr. Ismail, which was named after his late father. Yeah. Born in Johor Bahru, is the eldest son of Tun Dr. Ismail and Tun Tohwan Nurashikin. He was educated at the University of New England, Australia, and University of Oxford. He's worked in banking and started our first commercial TV station in Malaysia, TV3. I should do a pop quiz shortly. As a member of parliament from 1986 to 1990, he has helped publish 3 books on Tun Dr. Ismail with the Institute of Southeast Asian Studies, ISEAS. Some of us may know it by the short form or the initials. Initiator and administrator of Malaysia First. He's part of a group of individuals representing a cross-section of Malaysian society with the aim of greater national integration. Frequent critic of excessive religious influence over Malaysian society and has questioned the constitutionality of Chakim. Dr. Ui Hian Beng, who is a retired science education lecturer from the Institute of Teacher Education, Ipoh campus, IPGKI. In the 1990s, he represented the Buddhist community in the role of religion in curbing AIDS for an audience of government servants in Perak. He's currently the chairman of the Buddhist Missionary Society Malaysia, Perak branch 2019. He participated in a 10-day religious mediation course in 2018 organized by Jabatan Perpaduan and International Islamic University Malaysia, and was a presenter speaker on moral values for non-Muslim trainee teachers in IPGKI 2018 to 2019. Yeah. So that's briefly Dr. Ui Hian Beng. There's more to all our panelists. I'll move on to our two women on the panel. Juan Mary Magdalene Pereira. She was an associate professor at the Mara Institute of Technology, UITM, until 2010, where she taught politics and management to Bumiputras for 30 years. She has been active in human rights advocacy since the 1980s, both in her individual capacity and through NGOs like Amnesty International, Transparency International, Tenaganita, and Aliran. She's now an executive committee member of Aliran. She's also involved in justice and peace initiatives, as well as interfaith dialogue through the Catholic Church. At the community level, she's actively involved in the Rukun Tetangga and Subang Jaya City Council. And last but not least, Puan Andal Krishnan, who's an entrepreneur, a coach, and a trainer. Since childhood, Andal has always been reading books on spirituality. She was introduced to the Chicago lecture of Swami Vivekananda at the age of 7 by her father, and she has read many books by the different gurus of lineage. The Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads are her reference points to understand the existence of us, the human race. Every Sunday afternoon, she facilitates spiritual discourses or satsangs based on the Hindu scriptures. This is one side of Puan Andal. More to all our speakers. But for today, this will suffice, and I will also take a bit of time to introduce Pat Nunes, Patricia Nunes, who is acting as our timekeeper for today. Yeah, she's also the main organizer for today's dialogue. So let's see, who is Patricia Nunes? She's a certified professional facilitator who specializes in participatory approaches and dialogue. Since 2008, Patricia has been initiating inter-ethnic dialogue in building bridges, connecting communities, programs involving youth and community leaders. This was born out of love and concern for Malaysia and its diverse peoples. In 2020, these efforts were moved online in Zoom encounters. A dialogue series was begun to address issues of common interest to all communities, like understanding the federal constitution, inter-ethnic relationships, and interfaith issues. Today's series continues as we move into a post-pandemic world, and we still continue to do this online. To facilitate, Prof Tajuddin, are you ready? Great. Okay. So.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera to all my friends, and also for coming to this session. First of all, I would like to thank Patricia again and again for being able to manage this kind of session for me, because I'm not really that tech savvy to undertake it on my own. And I'm also deeply honored tonight to have 4 distinguished panelists who, from the short biodata that has been described by the moderator, must have done more work than I, because I only write and I only talk. Okay. So that is seems to be my contribution to this country. Tonight is rather special because the subject of education that I will be speaking about is not simply about universities and schools. It is about mainly our communities, how we educate ourselves in our communities, and most importantly, and this is the message that I wanted to impart tonight, is ourselves. So education starts with ourselves, every single one of us, and without that understanding, then our country will never change. We have the very simplistic notion that change will come if there is a new political party. We have a very naive notion that change will come if our universities change and our education system change. But the main thing or the main agent of change has always been ourselves, individuals. And even without any political conflicts with whatever parties and whatever civil servants that may think that they own the country, we can still do the change if we understand that single message, which is change start with ourselves. And the book that I have written actually addresses the change within ourselves. But when we look at the title, it's a very formal title: Issues and Ideas of Education in the New Malaysia, with a figure of a person with a university hat and all that. So it sort of implies that it is a university kind of a book, when in fact it is not. We are all in the journey of learning until we die, and this is the real change that we want to see. And we can only see it if and only if we be the change that we want for the country as well as for our children. Let me share my slides. So, starting with the issue of our 70-year failings, we still have, after almost 70 years, mistrust between races and faith. Now, we can reflect, whose fault is that? 99% will say, it's this politician or that. But actually, look deeper. I'm always giving talks to the public, and sometimes I will say, well, parents, they are the ones who were at fault, because they never really cared whether their children have friends of others, and they only care about A's and also subjects that have been taken as well as excellence in academia or in academic works. We are also failing in terms of not according dignity to others. Listen to the statement by one so-called religious teacher who happens to be a politician, saying that non-Muslims are the cause of all this corruption. I mean, for him to say that, actually, I am very surprised. If somebody were to tell me 10 years before that he would be saying that, I would say, you are a liar, because I followed this man for 30 years. Now he is saying that this is the cause of corruption by non-Muslims because they have not the true path. So this is a very interesting statement, because it is not only held by him, but a majority of middle-class Muslims. And that is the real problem. And that's why I say education is not about the institution, it is about the individuals. We also have no appreciation of cultures and heritage outside of our own. We look at the Born Orderly issue, the Oktoberfest issue. Hey, if you don't drink alcohol, don't go to the Oktoberfest. What is the problem there? Why must it be that because someone did something that your religion cannot do, then that means you shouldn't have it at all? But this happens to be the main narrative, not simply by one particular politician. a failure of communication between communities. When should we respond to an issue? How should we respond to the issue? Who should be responding to the issue? We actually have never learned. So when PH came into power, I was able to see that the one of the main, not actually the one, actually the main problem of the fall of PH was not really about Mahathir or Anwar, but it was actually about us being having a failed aspect of the manner of our communication, how we talk very, kurang ajar to certain individual, which is something we shouldn't do, how we want something very fast, not willing to wait because we waited for 60 years. All those things are affected a lot of things. A failure in governance in a democracy by the civil service. We need to rein in the civil service because the servants, they are serving this country and serving us, now think that they are the Tauke and the Sultan or the little Sultan here and there. We need to rein them in. And I hope you will support me when I write and say that we need at least 50% of their promotion points, meaning that any promotion of any top ranking officer must have 50% from the rakyat, because we are the one they serve. But here they keep promoting each other. So that's not supposed to happen. And fault finding is not something that is good for us in the personal growth. So my main message is that we must rethink our education objectives at the community level, at the school level, at the university level, but most importantly, at the personal level. Learning and continuing to learn is not an option. We cannot pass it to somebody else. Okay, somebody else. Like in Islam, you're too lazy to go and read up and also find things. Oh, just call Jakim or call the Ustaz and ask, Ustaz, ni boleh buat ke tak boleh buat ni? Just like that. I mean, gone are the days. You see every morning, my sister turns on the television every morning, I think. Tanyalah Ustaz. Tak payah baca buku. Tak payah fikir. Tanya Ustaz. Sebab apa? Kalau fikir, sesat. Baca buku, lagi sesat. Tengok YouTube Prof Tajuddin, besar sesat. These are the manner in which we are not having to educate. Rethinking our faith, our cultural practices and values and attitudes is a must. Now, all of us love our culture. All of us love our race. All of us love our heritage. All of us love our faith. There's nothing wrong with that. But we need to step out sometimes in order to look into whether what we are doing, are we just following a tradition? Are we simply imitating? Or are we actually understanding what is considered the truth to ourselves? So this is a very important lesson for each and every one of us. It starts with us. If we do not want to take the idea that we must rethink about some of the things that we have been, practicing, or even having this kind of values and things like that, then we will be a failure as an individual, as a person. This is what I understand from years of reading on motivational book. You are your own teacher in one sense. And the only way for you to do that is to step outside yourself and then to criticize yourself or have a self-reflection. I can quote many milestones, incident that happened in this country. This is a clear result of our community education or our religious education or our university education. The Mat Kilau film. The Mat Kilau film is a success that shows how bad our education is. A film that raised so many, like 100 million, or I don't know, 98 million or something like that, based on a false notion of history. And how is it that you can say in a clause, this movie is fiction. You just based it on main characters of history, and then you just say it is fiction. Now that is, unless you're talking about Hang Tuah, which is a legendary figure, then that's fine. But you're talking about a real life person, and not that long ago. The comedy insult, the man now can't even have any business for so many, forever. And we can't even laugh at ourselves as a race or as a culture. And if you cannot understand that, then I don't know what all the education is all about. The LCS disaster, I've written about it. We have got, let things happen to that point, and still we support the same people. All right, the Bon Odori Festival, and now we have the Namwi Katak song, which I'm happy to see gaining a lot of traction. And why this song has to be very popular is because of a few individuals who are so, thinking that their positions are more important than all of us in Malaysia, and dash all our hopes for many, many years, and just like that, to just turn over the fortune. And this is where we are now, worse and worse. I can't even see any light at the end of the tunnel. The overseas born children is a complete insult to women. Complete insult to women. I don't really know what else to say on this issue when you do not even acknowledge the mother. The Prophet Muhammad, this patriarchal thing, I'm sure comes from, maybe I'm wrong, but it's an Islamic thing, the patriarchal thing, bapa, anak Muhammad Tajuddin, women 9 bulan mengandung tapi bin Muhammad Tajuddin. Okay, so the point here is that the Prophet, when somebody asks, well, who should I contribute or do my duty to? Prophet said to your mother. Who is next? To your mother. And who is next? To your mother. And who is next? To your father. So I'm not sure. Perhaps somebody should telephone Mr. Idris, our minister, and remind him of this hadith of the women. Okay, the role of women in Islam as a very important role, and how is it that they are not given the dignity that is supposed to be due to them. The Bosco phenomenon hopefully will end on Tuesday, but then people taking bets what will happen. The Malay Salman Rushdie attack, I have not written yet. I'm still thinking whether I should write it or not because of the fear of the backlash on the Salman Rushdie attack. Is simple. If you Google in Malaysia, Rushdie attack, Abim, nothing. Rushdie attack, Ikram, nothing. Rushdie attack, Mufti, nothing. But in Indonesia, the Muhammadiyah group, a large group of Muslims, reject this attack. So this is what should be with the Muslim community. But education has taken over to the point that you support the idea of killing or attacking or bombing people simply because of what you interpret as an insult to religion. And this is something which is very, very, very worrying. And with that, you can just declare someone to die, and then someone else will definitely take the call, and the authorities will probably just look the other way. Now, after 35 years of teaching, I've come to some sort of a understanding about what is the purpose of education without me reading any books on philosophy of education. Basically, education is just to, first role is to, of course, create into our children the ability to have tools in order to survive. I mean, that's basic. What is it that you need to survive? Some tools. But secondly, I think education should provide the proper narratives, perspectives, and attitudes concerning history, politics that would help forge a strong bond between different races and cultures of humankind. The more so in our global society. So this, I think, is fundamental, and the way that we teach the subjects seems to be very isolated from the idea of compassion, the idea of people helping other people. It's all about numbers, it's all about dates, it's all about events, it's all about this, but not a narrative of, look, in order to survive, we need to respect each other, we need to do this. And this is, I feel, is not there. The third objective or purpose, I feel, is to realign the human soul into a spiritual center that will bring peace in life, suffering and death as a complementary cycle of existence. Now, this third one is actually a personal journey. I mean, universities can teach, religious institutions, obviously they also teach this, but it is entirely a personal journey. Lao Tzu says the way that can be told is not the eternal way. And I understood that, because unless you go through it yourself, whoever was the one, quote unquote, to be your guide, it's not going to last very long in terms of its lessons. Now, what happened to our education system? When we became independent, we were supposed to concentrate on the first two objectives, with the first objective given slightly more push. The first objective being the creation of tools for the industry and also for the survival of the nation. But the second objective, as the Razak report says, is mostly about people. It's about building communities. It's about nation building. Now, we have framed our school and university education in a completely industrial mode, as the country wanted personnel to man the machine that was supposed to bring wealth and prosperity. So here, this is what we did. Number one, we concentrate only on teaching the so-called skills so that these people become tools. All right, that's number one. Number two, I was just having a discussion with my daughter who's finishing out her PhD about art and heritage education. And art and heritage education is simply isolated into something that is not important. When in fact, art is something that is about sharing, and also something that has a lot of common spaces between different races, different histories, and it is actually one of the most critical and fundamental subject that will create a mind of thinking, rather than this other skill-oriented meaning only about rote learning and things like that. One of the professors that I know of said that people think that if you can't do science, you do art. Actually, if you can't do art, then only you do science. Because in art education, it is the most challenging. You're having to have an idea as something that is not there. The piece of painting, the piece of the building, and the sculpture, it's not there. But you have to come up with it. Not like the learning science, it's already there. You just have to figure out, oh, that's how it works, and then just memorize it for the exam. The second objective was firstly cared for, but later on entirely abandoned, and to be replaced with a narrow construct of religious and moral education, without, that has no contribution to nation building at all. So one group of people were allowed to teach their religion, and the others are to teach moral, and they are framed within that particular subject, and it doesn't discuss anything about other things, about the common heritage, about how we viewed and appreciate the work of arts, music, and all these rich ideas of mankind is lost simply because of the so-called industrial mode education philosophy. So fulfilling the second objective, forging a bond of brotherhood between nations and societies, if we are going to realign our education, we should concentrate on the second objective. In order to do that, firstly, we must realize that all our knowledge are boxes that both keep us safe, but while at the same box can also imprison us forever. So I wrote about this in saying that all the knowledge that we have, whether it is of Islam or of history or whatever that we have learned, you name it, they are all boxes. Because in order to transfer, you need to have it into a box so that you can carry and then move it here and there. But the box can keep you safe as long as you're in the box, but it can also be your prison. And so that's why at the end of the education, you must understand that it was just a box. And so you need to transcend the box and create new ones or expand. So this is the thing. But the problem with education is that we create the impression that it is a complete box. No need to do anything else anymore. And so that is the problem. Why? Because you already got A. There's nothing higher than an A. Secondly, we must be humble that we know very little about everything, and we must seek to learn about many disciplines, heritage, history, cultures. This is another point. When we go into the university specializes things. 80% of the subject in architecture is about architecture. 80% of the subject of engineering is about engineering. And this is a mistake, because specialization creates someone who is so fixated on something that he does not see the whole picture of the greater thing. And so we need to have the idea, when I wrote about the 60-20-20, 60% only on the subject of specialization, 20% on the subject of other discipline, and 20% about the idea of humanity. How would you approach this? So multidisciplinary 20%, 20% is about learning to be human. What is this humanity that you are talking about? So other than what you have studied, like business or medicine, stuff like that. We had, recently the task force on bullying and medical. So busy learning about medicine that you have no compassion for the students, to the point of having to bully and to do all these things. And this is a complete failure of education. If you cannot have the compassion to think that that person that you are having your apprentice could be your son or daughter. You must always think that they are your sons or daughter, not your slaves. So thirdly, in order to fulfill the second objective, we must be able to recognize and appreciate the knowledge and wisdom, practice and philosophy, and divine inspiration instead of numbered statistics. What I'm referring here is that the so-called scientific education. We are in this so-called scientific education to the point that the students no longer understand what is philosophy, what is wisdom, when they hear it from a person. So if there are no tables, there are no statistics, then this is nonsense. Now, education also for me needs to fulfill the third objective, which is to create a spiritual existence of peace with all things. As I said, institutions can teach this, but actually it's a personal journey. So in order to do that, firstly, that our children and students must learn to accord dignity to others of different race, faith, culture, socio-economic, gender, and outlook at any time and at all times. I don't know what happened to our education when we do not learn to accord dignity to others. When Ajahn Brahm says that the most important person in the world, well, who is the most important person in the world? The most important person is the one in front of you at any time. So a single lesson, a single statement has the impact of changing the whole world. We must also educate our children to appreciate differences of ideas, of understanding, of way of life. We don't teach about differences at all. When we teach history, we don't say things like, oh, this race, they did this, they had this political party, and they fought for this, and this other race, they did this and did this, and then they also had some idea about fighting the colonialists, and both of them then merged. We talk about the differences of the races and their contributions. In geography, we don't teach that these are the people with the small and medium industry. These are the people with the hawkers. I don't know what they call the small economies, and these are the others that they are doing the palm a farm and things like that. We don't teach about the different people. Differences make life. Hydrogen and oxygen creates water. Hydrogen and hydrogen tak guna sangat lah. Okay. So science also thinks that we do not teach about differences that makes life in general. Now, we must also remind our children that man is one community as we share life-giving blood and organs, and we see all humanity in all its suffering and triumph. Only when the pandemic hits, we see this happening. Why should we wait for a pandemic? Why should we wait until we are sick? When we need an organ, oh, siapa ni China bagi? Oh, I love to watch YouTube where people meet those donors of heart, organs like kidneys and things like that, and then they meet these people themselves, and they are usually of various different cultures, different religion, and that is a beautiful thing. I mean, that's a basic thing. Okay, why must you look at another culture, another faith, another race when you are all of the same blood? Okay, and why is this not? why we don't even have to teach this thing? It's supposed to be. Okay, but then we look upon others as if like they are dirty laundry or things like that. You don't know, like Hadi Awang, one day you might need, your son or your daughter might need someone from somebody else who is the one that you say are corrupted, are natural corruptors. Okay, so arrogant to think that, oh, only Muslim must get organs from Muslim, things like that. Fourthly, we must educate our children that all our heritage history points to the unchallenged fact that we need each other. I've already said. This is a spiritual lesson, actually taught by one of my architect friends who talked about heritage. He said heritage is the confluence, the meeting point of all the cultures that help to make who you are right now, as well as what that building is there. And so when we look at the building, we look and reminded of the confluence of the cultures. So when you look at the name, Jalan, with the Chinese name or with the Indian name, that is history. But we have officers here in the DBKL or in the Majlis Perbandaran, oh, kita tukar nama jadi Jalan Hang Lekiu. Who the hell is Hang Lekiu? Couldn't care 2 cents about Hang Lekiu. It doesn't even exist. But this person that the name represent is part of history, and we should honor that. And for some reason, we don't. Okay. In conclusion, every one of us must re-educate ourselves. I mean, this is the key, because if we educate ourselves, then whether in whatever positions we are, family man, teacher, business person, owning, having all these workers, we make a difference in whichever we are, in our family, in our business. This is grassroots business. This is not political, what's his name, Razin, minister punya business. Okay, you say whatever you want to say lah. Okay, it's only got a few more months left. Learning about others is the true path to change. Spiritual, social, and economic growth. All this needs the others. Why is it that one particular race think that they can survive on their own, but we don't need the others? Okay, boycott McDonald's, boycott this and boycott that. 75% of their things are made by those they want to boycott. That's a doubt. No need to wait for policy changes that will never perhaps materialize. Sorry, spelling mistake. We must become the change we want to see. I think that Gandhi said that. And that's very good. We then become a change agent to our children and those under our responsibilities. We are the true and only power of change, not government or so-called authorities. So this is the message actually in the book. It's about education, it's about change, Most importantly, it's about the power within ourselves to educate ourselves for change. And I think after 22 years of writing to try to get change into this country, and seeing a lot of things happening, that is actually my conclusion. The conclusion is simply that the power of change is within us, and it requires that we educate ourselves so that we can be different than what we were before. So with that, I'd like to thank you for being patient in listening to my talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof Tajuddin, for taking us through that journey. And I know at the personal level, as I listened to what you were saying, it's at the end of the day, change starts with the self, with the I. And until and unless we begin to reflect and do our own introspection, or muhasabah diri, as Hadi probably would say, since he's our pet name that we're using today. Muhasabah diri, and really the other thing that personally struck me is rethinking our faiths, cultural practices, values, and attitudes. It's definitely a must. And this culture of Tanya Ustad, Tanya Sheikh, is worrisome.
Thank you very much. And salams to everybody, to Prof Tajuddin and to the panelists. Thank you very much for inviting me tonight to be part of this very interesting and very timely and relevant topic. I don't have the same experience as Professor Tajuddin in the Islamic resurgence that he experienced as a student, and which shaped his thinking. Because I'm one of those Malays who are branded as Western liberal educated Malays, and with a different background and different view of where we should have gone and where we have been. In terms of history, I'd like to say how very proud I am of living in Taman Tun Dr. Ismail, because it is one of the model townships that was started in the 70s. It was named after my late dad. And one of the significant things of that township, which Prof Tajuddin had alluded to, was the fact that it commemorates the many founding fathers of this country in a small township. And regardless of race and background, Taman Tun Dr. Ismail has commemorated the names of people like Datuk Sulaiman, Leong Yuko, the first and only Chinese governor of Penang, of Malacca, sorry, and Tun Muhammad Fuad Stevens, and Tun Abang Haji Openg of Sabah and Sarawak. I think this is one of the very few places in Malaysia that commemorates the Malaysia that should have been, where we are supposed to have integrated our histories and our past. And I'm very proud of the fact that at least in Wilayah Persekutuan Taman Tun Dr. Ismail has taken that step of commemorating the history of the nation, especially as we remember our Merdeka Day coming and the Malaysia Day coming. I have also a different perspective of the way education should have been developed after Tun Razak and my dad were in government. When they started the new economic policy, the idea was to uplift the Malays economically, so that not only would they benefit economically, but by being stronger economically and financially, they would be able to have a wider mind and also a more secular view of their place in the world. Instead, we have been brought back into a kind of an Islamic Middle Age by political parties that use religion to further their own agenda, and also to prolong the life of certain politicians in the Malaysian landscape. And I think this is a step backwards for the Malays. We don't progress by being more Islamic. In fact, it is quite retrogressive if the religion has been compounded with superstition and with a fear of the other. I think what Prof Tajuddin has done in the book has been to highlight certain traits and values which the new Muslim graduate that he sees on page 104 of his book should be imbued in the thinking of the Malays. And among these traits which Professor Tajuddin had listed out, the first one is concern about the well-being of all men, which is very important. The second one, that he loves all men as a single brotherhood. The third, that he understands the strength and weakness of religious institutions, and that he discerns what is cultural and what is eternal. This is very important because what is cultural and what is eternal shape the way we think of ourselves and of our culture and of our nation. And also the new Muslim graduate understands the world as his environmental vehicle of survival. He understands his religion in the place of human history and a civilizing quest. He knows that he does not know all, and that is a key to wisdom. And lastly, he can fit into all meaningful organizations and national culture. I think these are the points which Prof Tajuddin has listed out very lucidly, and also very timely for all of us to pay attention to. Of course, as in
the red card has already appeared, Taufik.
Sorry.
If you want to wrap up.
Okay, I'd like to conclude by saying that I'm very much in favor of his conclusion that we need an ecumenical start to an education system in this country, and I would like to end at that point. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Taufik.
As what Prof Tajuddin has mentioned, we shouldn't be depending on politicians and government departments and all this to do the change. Another thing that attracted me to what Prof mentioned was, well, we need to be the change we want to see in the country. And education, self-education is very important in that aspect. And I believe what he has mentioned also about we need to rethink our faiths, our cultural practices, values, and attitudes. I think these are the very core values that we need to look into when we talk about education. And as Prof has mentioned just now, we are too much into you can say the technical aspects of education, science being science, arts being arts. They are so boxed up that we don't have what is known, what we call as a holistic education. And I think this is one of the themes that Prof actually was trying to mention, that our education system, our education should be holistic in nature and not just confined to certain aspects, certain specialties only. I also like to share what Prof has mentioned in his book. I've read his book and I find there's so many important things that I wanted to say, but I will choose one chapter only. when he mentioned about 4 educational values towards acceptance of multiculturalism, which I think is relevant to our education system. And Prof mentioned in the book what he called the 4 values of worth. One is willful ignorance. Second is the ability to step outside the identity of self, acknowledging the dignity of the other, which he also mentions just now in his sharing. And the fourth one is rebuilding the love empathy construct, which is a very Buddhist thing in terms of we have what is known as the 4 Brahma Viharas, and this sympathetic joy, empathy is one of the things that's mentioned. What I was attracted to in this chapter 4 was then the way he defined willful ignorance. That is the self-admission that we do not know everything, that we don't really know much. And this is also very similar to what the Buddha has mentioned when he said that the knowledge that we know is just like a handful of leaves compared to the actual knowledge, which is actually like the whole forest. So actually our knowledge about ourselves, our environment, about other people are very, very limited. And I think that is what Prof Tajuddin was trying to mention in the book in chapter 4. Of course, the other thing is that he mentioned the second important value is the ability to step outside the identity of self. And he mentioned that conflicts arise when we try to define the constructs that we have. And I see this is actually happening where we feel so easily insulted by what people say. We do not know how to laugh at ourselves. We take two things as trying to be too politically correct, that at times we are not true to ourselves. And the third thing he mentioned was actually about acknowledging the dignity of others. And I think it is important that we need to respect people for who they are, for what they believe in, as long as it doesn't go against the social norms. All of us, like what Prof mentioned, we love our religion, we love our culture. But if we learn to accept other people's culture, we learn to accept and respect other people's religion, I think it will make Malaysia a much richer society, a much better society than the only thing that we are the best, only our religion is correct, and so forth. And the final thing I'd like to mention was the idea of rebuilding the love, empathy construct. And I think this is so important that we have to look at people from their point of view. We have to look at the problems they face and try to help them. I mean, I remember my principal once said, instead of trying to be successful yourself, why not make everybody successful? And I think that was actually the initial philosophy behind NEP, but somehow it didn't work the way it was intended to be. I mean, anybody who is a true Malaysian should not reject the original idea of NEP. But of course, now that it has been, in a way, very much misused and abused, then we have to rethink again, how should we rebuild the society? All in all, I would like to say is that what Prof has mentioned just now gives me the idea that the kind of education we need for Malaysia is a holistic kind of education. You mentioned about the 60-20-20. I think that's a beautiful idea. As a science educator, I always believe we are missing the arts aspect of science. Arts is so much part of our life, but somehow or other, arts become not so important, which is a sad thing, because I think arts makes our life much, much more meaningful, more beautiful. This is my sharing for what I can gather from Prof sharing just now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Uy. Moving on, I'd like to invite Puan Mary Magdalene to share with us her thoughts, her views, her comments after Prof Tajuddin's presentation just now. Mary?
Thank you, Dr. Hamida. Good evening, everyone. So happy to be here with you all to share some of my views and my response to Prof Tajuddin's presentation. Generally, I do agree with his conclusions. I especially agree with what he said about education beginning with ourselves. Change starts with ourselves and within ourselves. I've always been a very strong proponent of the power of one, that we can bring about change, but we start with ourselves. So one person can do a lot, but when that one person collaborates with like-minded individuals, then there's a multiplier effect, and more can be done. So here, when we talk about the education system, I think in Malaysia, I agree with Prof completely that parents have to play a very important role. What we have seen, I think, is very often parents have abdicated their responsibility. Maybe they are so busy making a living, that they are unable to monitor, unable to get involved in the education system, in the schools. So the role of parents, teachers, teachers unions is very important in the education system. I think there's no country where you have a neutral education process. In most countries, the education system cannot be divorced from the political system, from politics, right? And very often, what students are taught, how they are taught, is often linked to serve a political agenda in most countries. So this is where we as parents, as citizens, as teachers unions have a role to play. I think for too long in Malaysia, all the stakeholders have been complicit in the sense that they have been silent. They have left it to others to handle, left it to the politicians, to the policymakers to do things. And therefore they have abdicated, and they have become enablers of the present system that we complain so much about, right? But we are responsible for it. How many parents actually know what's happening in the classroom, what's happening to their children, what's happening? So when we talk about bringing in spiritual values, and I always believe values are caught, not taught, right? Whatever they can teach, whatever in the schools, but then what happens at home when they go back home, right? And what they teach in school, is it manifested in the ethos and in the culture of the schools, in the way the teachers behave, in the words they use, in their actions? Does it reflect these noble values that they teach? I'm sure in all our schools they talk about noble values, but what they teach and what they actually manifest every day in their dealing with their students may be something else, right? And very often you will find that when the children go back home, what is being manifested? What do they witness at home, right? So we can talk about multiculturalism being taught in schools and all that, but when they go back home, what do they learn from their parents? What do they learn in their family, right? I just want to give one small example of how when my daughter was like 9-10 years old in school, and she had lined up with her friends to, teacher said, okay, pegang tangan 2 by 2, line up and walk into the classroom after recess. And then her Muslim friend, her Malay friend, refused to hold her hand. And she says, because you sentuh anjing, you pegang anjing, you makan babi, so saya tak boleh pegang tangan you, So where is this coming from, right? And this is in a urban school in Subang Jaya, right? Not from some kampung school. So you can teach all kinds of values in school, but what happens at home, right? So this is where I agree very much with what Prof says about parents have a role to play, and education starts with ourselves. Therefore, it is not something that we can separate, what's happening in school and then what happening. It's all integrated, it's all linked, right? So that's one aspect. But I do not agree with Prof on something though. Prof says that he can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. I don't know, maybe I'm an eternal optimist. I'm always, or naively optimistic, I don't know. But I do see many sparks, right? That can get the fire going, that can light the fire of change. For example, in spite of all that we complain about the education system, we have people like Ain Husniza who has spoken up against this, the rubbish that the teachers talk about in school. All right, we have people, university students, who are brave to go out and demonstrate against what's happening in the effects of public policies in Malaysia. We have the Lawan movement, which is basically many young people who are involved. So these are the sparks that I see, which gives me hope that we can bring about change. And yes, we begin with ourselves, but there are people out there that we can collaborate with and that we can work together with to bring about a multiplier effect and work towards that change. What they say is we need more people so that we reach tipping point. And tipping point is about 30% of getting the majority to see what we want to see. So in that sense, I do see the light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you for keeping that light at the end of the tunnel as sparkling, small sparks, little sparks, without that, well, it's going to be very difficult to stay alive and exist in this current turmoil that the nation, that we see around us. So thanks, Mary. And moving on, Wanandal Krishnan, can I invite you to give your comment?
Good evening, and thank you so much. I feel so honored to be with such an august panel. So let me just get straight to the point. Thank you so much, Prof Tajuddin. It was honestly, I was lost for words as to what to say after you, but nevertheless, I had time to think after all the others. Number one, I have to say that when you said that we should have respect and diversity and inclusion, all three of these statements, I totally agree with you. Respect for everyone, and diversity is a strength, and inclusion is a virtue. And to do that, what I would ask you, Prof, to add to all the things that you said the education system should do, is to bring in something called world religions. This is taught in many of the international schools. And to teach world religion as part of the history, but without, and I repeat the word without, cherry picking or distorting any truth. That would be a starting point to give everyone a fair knowledge of what the different religions are, different culture, and different faiths are. Now, I just want to, as a Hindu, I've often thought that people have honestly misunderstood and sometimes no fault of theirs, and what they see, because the philosophy is often hidden by the paraphernalia of temples and festivals. But do you know that there is a halal part of Hinduism, which is called yamas and niyamas? And the yamas and niyamas will very much seem like what is in the Quran as well. And this is part of yoga, the 8th path of yoga. The only yoga that a lot of people have heard about is the asanas. That means the postures that you do. Or at the most, meditation and the breathing. But the yoga actually starts with, well, like what I mentioned, the halal practices of a good human beings. And let me just give you those 10, which might resonate very well with the different religions. And this is what you should be taught in schools as well. For example, non-violence. Number 2, not truth, that there is only one truth. Number 3, that you shall not covet other things and you should not steal. Number 4, non-excess. Greed is a sin. And number 5, non-possessiveness, that means sharing. Move on. Number 6, that one has to cleanse the mind and the body. Number 7, contentment is a virtue. Number 8, self-discipline. Number 9, self-study for inner exploration. And number 10, surrender to the Almighty. Doesn't this sound familiar to all the religions, but how many people do know that is actually part of Hinduism? Why? Because it will not be in the mainstream. And many of us who learn this is because we learn it in our own religion. So that is the first thing I want to say. Add world religions as part of Sejarah. But again, I have to repeat, without cherry picking and without distortion. Number two, talking about charismatic leaders, it is very sad that someone like Prof Tajuddin doesn't have a larger following, only because what he says frightens people. I actually don't think parents are a good place to start in Malaysia. Many of the parents who are very comfortable and they have aspirations for children do not want to rock the boat. They actually don't want to see everything being equal, be it any of the races. If they have an advantage over others, they're going to keep it that way. So I'm sorry to say, as parents, there are very few enlightened parents who will actually want to rock the boat. And number three, the political system has to change the education system, because without that, I think individually for us to do, I see, in fact, it being non-starter. And finally, with 20 seconds to go, if we can believe that KL is a community of diversity and proudly put it in when we enter KL, let us be true to the word, to that we are a country, a nation of diversity. But I must say, I'll take one more minute. I want to say that we need charismatic leaders. Although I do believe in the power of one, I do believe the change starts with one, but if we don't have somebody who will be in the forefront and risk his reputation and risk his or her reputation and be the banner which we can follow, I actually think it'll all be in small, thought groups like such as ours, and will remain like that. But I'm optimistic like you, Mary. I wish you the best. Thank you very much. Namaste.
Thank you. Thank you, Andal. And
there's so many different books in it. I like to introduce this one called The 8 Limbs of Yoga. Many, like I said, would have heard of yoga as an asana, as a posture, meditation, as well as breathing. But actually, it has got the whole gambit of things. It starts with yama, which is morality, then goes on to union, that means it is unity, and then it goes to observation of like I may use the word halal practices, and focus in whatever you do. And breath work, I just mentioned it, meditation, posture, and finally withdrawal from all the sensorial things. That means slowly and surely give up things. And finally, of course, we will find all these 8 things getting together and make the person a better person. Now, this is universal. It has actually got no bearing to any particular religion, but this is the practice that I would like to say can be included in our education system without stating that something else is wrong and this is right. I just want to give this time to other speakers as well, and we can have more time for questions. I just want to say this. When we believe there's only one right and the other thing must be wrong, we have got no hope. When we believe there are different paths to the same righteousness, then we have hope. And that has to be clearly defined, that every path will get us to the same place and not just one path. And if we do not articulate this and make it very clear, then we'll always have this ambiguity, this kind of strategic ambiguity that's going on in Taiwan right now. I like the word strategic ambiguity, where the ambiguity is in your favor and you will do it to suit you. And you will strategize that ambiguity, again, for something that you want to gain. So only there is going to be total transparency will we be able to put things right. Back to you, Hamida.
Prof Tajuddin?
Thank you very much. Well, this is fun for me because I learning a lot from all the panelists on all the different views. First of all, from Dr. Uy, who said that much of what I was saying is almost similar to what Buddhism is, simply because I learned a lot from Buddhist teachings from all the YouTube of watching Ajahn Brahm or Pap Dung and other Dalai Lama to speak. So I have deep respect. Also, my teacher Eckhart Tolle, takes a lot of it from Hinduism and Buddhism from the teaching. Now with Mary, when I said I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, it is this tunnel. So my idea is to build another tunnel. So that's very easy for me to see whatever light that I want. And usually that is actually the epiphany that I got. Instead of fighting and trying to change things now, we'll just build another one. And Buckminster Fuller said that you don't fight a bad idea, you work towards a good idea to the point that the bad idea is, nobody thinks about it anymore. Okay, so to outlive that. And so much of our energy then is not about that fighting, even though, yes, it's fine to do that, but we have to build another way. And from Taufik, I learned that Taman Tun Dr. Ismail is doing something. So I would like to know more about that and perhaps write about it, because as I said, all I do is read, write, and talk. That's all I do. I don't go for demonstrations or all those things, but that's what I like to understand. And so I'm most honored to have learned from all of the speakers today with regard to their thoughts.
Thank you, Dr. Hamida. Yeah, I like Prof's idea about building another tunnel. And I think those sparks that I see at the end of the tunnel are actually doing that, They are making changes to the existing tunnel. And we need to collaborate with these people. I agree completely with Andal that we need the right people in leadership positions, the right people in government. But who decides who is going to be in government? It's still us. It's still up to us to decide who is going to be in government, who is going to represent us in parliament. So in that sense, it still comes back to us. But we do not stop at just voting every 5 years and then wash our hands of the whole system. No, political participation requires that we are involved in many different ways. We can do it, where we keep in touch with our MPs, we make our voices heard through CSOs, through groupings, and so on. So in the end, yes, we need the right people, we need the right leadership, but it's up to us to decide who that leadership is going to be, right? And I also like very much the point brought up by Andal that many parents want to vote. I've seen this myself in my experience with my children, both in government school and in private school. I put my children in private school for a year and then I took them out of the school because it was such a bad experience, right? But what I've seen is many parents don't want to, they're afraid that their children will be victimized. And therefore, even when they see things going wrong in the school, they keep quiet. Or the rich will just take the children out of the school and put them in a private school, right? So I've seen many people who are professionals, lawyers, doctors, but they don't want to go in and complain about something that happened in school, because they're afraid the children will be victimized. What I tell parents and what I tell my friends is we have to show our children how to stand up against injustice, against discrimination, against unfair practices in the school. We have to teach our children, we have to train them to speak up in school. So this is where people like Ain Husniza, I take my hat off to her parents. I think her parents have done a good job in bringing her up, in training her in these things. And this is also what Paulo Freire talks about, and he talks about the pedagogy of the oppressed. What is the role of education? The role of education is to develop critically conscious, humanized learners who act to liberate themselves and the world from injustice, leading to social transformation. For me, that is the basic idea of education. And this is why when I was in UITM as well, when I used to teach my students Malaysian politics, and I used to tell my students, there's no ISA, there's no Sedition Act in my classroom. You can speak freely. And I always tell them, ask the right questions. Train the students to ask the right questions, all right? Or we ask them the right questions and help to bring out what is within them based on their experience. So we have to train our children, we have to train our students to think critically and to have the courage to speak up when they see something that's not right. We have to train them to stand up for their rights in school, right? For example, in my children's school, there was once when my daughter's cross was confiscated, all right? And the teacher said that, oh, this is a accessory you're wearing to school. So I went to the school, I spoke to the headmistress and I say, is your tudung an accessory? If you say my daughter's cross is an accessory and she cannot wear it to school, I can say your tudung is an accessory. And when I went to the education department to complain about it, I was told that there is no such ruling that the child cannot wear a cross to school. So it is certain headmistresses or headmasters and certain teachers who make their own rules. So then I came back and I trained my children what to do the next time the teacher confiscates your cross or does something which is not right. How to speak to the teachers, how to handle it yourself as a student. So this is where I feel that each of us have a role to play as parents, as teachers. The teachers' unions, what are they doing? What is the teachers' union doing about all the complaints that we see in the education system? So this is where, as stakeholders, we have an important role to play. The rich can always mitigate by, moving to overseas, migrating, move to a private school. But the rest of us are left behind in the education system, and therefore we have to work within the system to bring about the change that we want to see.
Thank you. On the dot, Mary, thank you. Let's continue with to hear round. We're still in round 2. So Dr. Ooi, do you have anything else to add to this current conversation?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, there are a few comments I'd like to make. One is from Andal when she mentioned about we need charismatic leaders. And Prof earlier did mention that in our system, they self-promote themselves. And being involved with the education, I would say directly, especially in training teachers and so forth, we find that there is a big problem in getting good trainers. Because most of the time, the education officers will choose the people they know, but the people they know may not be the best. When I was involved with PPMSI, the teaching of maths and science and English, I had a partner who could not speak English at all, but he was selected as one of the trainers. So something is quite wrong with the way we select people to train people for their in-service training. And I also like to comment on what Mary mentioned about asking the right questions. One of the things that I always complain about our education system is that we have never taught our children to ask questions. We only ask them, we only want them to answer. And even when the answer is correct, they're happy. They're not allowed to think, they're not, the questions they ask are basically to get right answers, but not to encourage thinking. And this is something that I find is very lacking even in our teachers' training. I actually did a paper, but I did not publish it. One was, are we actually training our teachers, future teachers, to actually ask good questions and to encourage children to ask questions? And both of these are actually lacking. Even our lecturers are not asking good questions. And how do they model, or how do the students model good questioning when they themselves had not seen good questions being asked. So this is something that we have to look into. How do we train our future teachers, lecturers to actually ask good questions and encourage children to ask questions? And sometimes when I do my training for teachers, they are always afraid of higher order thinking skills question. They always say, wah, susah lah ini, tak boleh lah, cikgu tak boleh handle lah. And then to me is, if the teachers cannot handle, train them to handle. And this is something that we need to really look into if we want our students to be critical and creative thinkers. Thank you, that's my share.
Right, thank you, Dr. Uy. Can I invite Taufik to please come and join us in this dialogue with any other additional views that you may have or thoughts?
I was listening to the comments just now about the type of people that we are training to be leaders. I think if we look back at history, I think the Singapore government did it right. When Lee Kuan Yew was looking for leaders in the civil service and in government, what he did was he gave scholarships for engineering. The reason is because engineers are trained to look at a problem, break it down into its smallest component, and then rebuild that problem into something which they can understand and which they can manage. And I think that kind of thinking has helped Singapore produce very good technocrats and managers in their society. And I think that's something which Malaysia lacks, a good managerial cadre of people. And one of the thrusts of the NEP was to make people self-sufficient in managing the economy, as well as the social structure which the country is founded upon. And I think we need to look long and hard at how we train and produce our future students to cope with the challenges of the future. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much for panelists for the responses and inputs and views. It's the dialogue, this conversation today is really taking shape and building up. I want to now open the space for Q&A.